friends, and what I actually heard and not saw was another aid worker that I collaborated with through the same organization had been known to use prostitutes in terms of patronizing them, paying them for sex. And that was a big shock for me to hear it. Thankfully, I did not see it, but I know since this story broke, a number of other workers in the aid industry have said the same thing, like me too, basically.
So when you hear those stories, you heard them back then and you hear them now, are you surprised that the story is broken?
I am and I am not. I think when you get into the aid industry, you want to do it to promote the greater good, and I think many, the majority are in it for that reason, but I think there are people who, similar to Harvey Weinstein in Hollywood, kind of act outside of the norm, and when you have that, I think the response has to be strong, it has to be forceful, and it has to make clear that that type of behavior will not be accepted.
Now, it's clear that we're talking about abusive relationships here, yes, essentially, because it involves a power imbalance.
That's
These
right.
men are in the country, and it's predominantly men that we're hearing about here, and they're paying a prostitute for sex. And some people would say, well, is it abuse or is it a choice? How would you describe it?
100% it's abuse. Anytime you have people in a position where they are compelled to act in a manner that they might not otherwise act, that is an abuse of power, it's an abuse of trust. And I think what has happened here, especially since it was the same staff member twice, was that someone who was known to be powerful to the communities where they were placed then took advantage of that position and did things that were abusive to the people involved on the other side.
So the next step, I suppose, is you will always get bad stories like this where people are trying to do good. So how do you fix it? And one of the things we're seeing now in the case of Oxfam, but it's been extended wider to the charity sector, is the idea of safeguards. Yes. Will that be enough?
I think safeguarding, while it may not be enough, and some could argue that it is or it isn't, but I think if you don't at least put safeguards in place, you can't say that you tried all that you can. So one of the things that I thought about was, why aren't they using forms of mobile reporting? So there's an organization called Labor Voices that enables employees of an organization to make anonymous reports by surveys, by calls, a helpline, for when they see abusive behavior. And then there's also UNICEF's U Report, which allows communities, local communities, to be able to send in reports about things in their community that concern them. And for me, I think, as mobile disperses, that this is a unique opportunity for Oxfam and all of the aid industry really to step up and say, now we're trying to do as much as possible to be transparent, to be accountable to the vulnerable, and to really make sure that we are responding forcefully to these types of incidents.
Okay. Dr. Ronda Zelezny-Green, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, do stay with us here on Focus on Africa. We've got plenty more coming up on BBC World News. I'm Nakwesa Burak, and later, Africa's first elected female president wins the lucrative Ibrahim Prize for African leadership.
The story is centuries deep. It starts with the vision of wise men who weave a masterpiece they call home. They venture on journeys full of twists and turns to treasures of awe, of beauty, waiting for you to arrive. Abu Dhabi, your extraordinary story.
Would you trust a flying taxi?
We are at the very